This show is brought to you by Go Live TV. Download the app now.
Buongiorno, good morning. It's Joe Volpe, publisher of Corriere Canadese, North America's only Italian-language daily newspaper, here on behalf of Go Live TV and Corriere Media Group. I've got a very special guest this morning to talk about all those issues federal that have to do with employment, with human resources, skill development, but most important, job creation and people who want work. And in the studio with me this morning is none other than the minister responsible for all of that criteria, the Honorable Patty Hajdu. Did I pronounce the name correctly?
You did. Very good.
Great.
Nice to be with you.
Minister, thank you very much for being here. I know that you came into town to make a special announcement with respect to youth who are disadvantaged or who don't appear to find their way in the same fashion as others. So what was that announcement about?
So we announced that we were expanding funding to a program called Away Home, and this is a program that supports organizations that work with youth that are homeless or at risk of being homeless to get the skills they need and to be supported in the way they need so that they get permanent employment.
But that's not specific to Toronto. I mean, you're a federal minister. You're looking at kids who find themselves in that situation everywhere.
That's right. And oftentimes big cities, kids will navigate to larger urban centers because there's more services and supports. But you're right, it can happen to a young person no matter where they live in the country. This project's focused on Ontario and Alberta, but there are a number of other programs that we fund across the country. And again, all with the idea that young people who need that extra support are going to have those supports so that they don't just get that work experience without anybody kind of helping them stay in those good jobs.
So you're talking about actually preparing them for a work environment rather than just calling up an employer and saying, listen, I got, Patty or somebody else is looking for a job.
Right, because what we know is that if they're not supported in the other aspects of their life, they maybe aren't going to experience support or experience success in that workplace. And employers oftentimes don't have the patience, the money, the time, and if they're not actually aware that the young person is struggling, they lose that investment that they've made in hiring and training that young person, and the young person loses that opportunity. So this helps ensure that the young person is well supported to stay in that workplace.
But some of those kids are already in a, if I understand it correctly, they're already in a tenuous situation. Some of them are homeless or at least living in shelters. Or am I wrong?
The point is to try and help them move either out of a shelter if they are in a shelter or prevent them from ending up in a shelter. So these programs work with young people that are technically on the books homeless, but they might be couch surfing. They might be living with parents, friends, or with, But
you're not interfering with families, just because they happen to be, as you say, couch surfing. They might still be at home. You're not saying, listen, get away from the house and go and do this.
No, there's no judgment on a young person's path or no interference in the young person's path. It's about meeting that young person where they're at. And so, obviously, if a young person can reunite with their family, that's a fantastic outcome. But that's not possible for many young people. And so families are struggling. This is really focused on supporting that young person to really do much better on that journey as they try to grow up and become an adult, that they have the skills they need.
So, people are constantly throwing around the word young. Like, where does that, what's the time frame?
Well, it's loosely defined for sure, but we do know it's taking longer and longer for people to launch, if you will. And so the definition for youth for the program that I'm talking about is 15 to 30. And different programs, different services.
So you can be 15 years of age, where they might still be in high school, to 30 years of age, where they'd be graduating from medical school.
Well, if they're graduating from medical school, one would argue they wouldn't need this support.
So we're not talking about those people.
But we're talking about, for this particular program, young people that have, for a variety of reasons, experienced high degrees of trauma in their life. Oftentimes, kids are coming out of foster care, for example, and they're not well equipped. They're 16 years old. They maybe have been in families 23, 25 foster families in their lives. And so you can imagine that the stability in a young person's life, it just isn't there in the way that it is in maybe somebody who's had a stable family life growing up. And what we know is that if you don't make those investments in young people early on, it ends up being very expensive down the line for as we leave people behind. In fact, it costs societies quite a bit. And there's a moral argument as well that we should be trying to make sure that everybody has a fair chance.
Well, let me talk about fair chances, and then we'll talk about moral argument really quickly. So how much is all of this going to cost? What's the program value in terms of dollars and cents?
This particular program is just over $2.5 million, but it's through the Youth Employment Strategy. And of course, there's, the Government of Canada spends hundreds of millions of dollars on employment and billions of dollars through transfers to provinces and territories. And
is your department still the biggest one in government?
I wouldn't be able to answer that off the top of my head, but we definitely have quite a number of services and programs under my portfolio. It's all job skills training, labor issues, but there's also through ESDC, there's the Canada Child Benefit, the Poverty Strategy, the housing work that we do, and of course Service Canada that responds to Canadians no matter what their questions are about the government.
So you're the person that we would all love or love to hate.
I think that you could say that about a lot of politicians. All I know about, for me, is that I got into politics because I wanted to help make a more fair playing field. I believe
this is an example of it, isn't it?
It really is, yeah.
Now, the other part, the moral part here, isn't this, and I hope you don't think it's too tough a question, but isn't this the sort of stuff that one would normally expect the provincial government to do? And because the provincial government does do some of that, are you interfering in provincial jurisdiction?
Well, not at all, because we transfer billions of dollars, like I said, to provinces and territories. We signed an agreement just a couple of years ago with Ontario for $6 billion. That money goes into skills training programs like the youth employment stuff that they do, college readiness programs, all kinds of different skills training. I know that even though those transfers happen, there are still pockets of people that don't get services or are too far away from those kinds of services. They have too many barriers. And our government, our Liberal government, believes that everybody deserves a fair chance to succeed, because when people succeed, of course, they become good employees, they become entrepreneurs, they start businesses, and they hire other people. So this is really an economic argument as well, that we really search out those pockets where we can amplify the work that happens at provinces.
So you've identified, by that, I guess, you've identified the organizations, community organizations, social service organizations, even cultural organizations that might qualify for some of this?
Yeah, it's application-based. Most of the money that's distributed through my department and my portfolio is money that people have applied for. They go through a rigorous screening process. We have increasing expectations around measuring outcomes. So not only did the person get a job, but how long did they manage to keep that job, and what was the quality of that work? And all of that gives us a good sense as we move forward as a government if the money that we're spending is actually resulting in the outcomes that we hope it will.
Would it be fair to say that you're really trying to reestablish some of the principles, the moral themes around which people direct themselves towards work and how employers look for quality people?
Well, I think what we're trying to do is say that when there's equity in the system and when people have a fair chance to succeed, that the entire country benefits. And so, for example, employers have a need right now more than ever to have great, qualified, skilled people. You know, we have job shortages across the country. You may have heard that our job numbers came out last week.
5.7% unemployment. That's, I mean,
lowest since 1970. The youth unemployment rate is at 10%, which is still high, but the lowest it's been since the 70s. So what we're doing is we're actually making good on what we talked to Canadians about in 2015, which is that if you invest in yourselves as a country, if you invest in your people, if you build the things that you need in terms of prosperous, optimistic cities and communities, that the economy will thrive, and that's exactly what we're seeing.
Well, I was about to interrupt and say 5.4, statistically by economists is considered, full employment. And 0.3 away from full employment. Do you really need these things?
We need to make sure that we don't leave anybody behind. First of all, because it is a waste of their potential, and it's expensive to take care of people. The more they're left behind, the sicker they get, the more they become marginalized. But also because we need those people in the workforce, as you just said, full full employment means a new challenge for employers, and that is, where will they find the people they need? So immigration is one part of it, but we know that there's still pockets of very high unemployment in our country, and that would include people like young people who are struggling to get ahead or that are, vulnerable. But it also includes Indigenous communities. It includes people with disabilities, some of the best educated people in our country, who, for a whole bunch of reasons, don't find the same success in the workforce as others. So now we work with employers to say, what are your needs and how can we better fit you with those people that are still struggling for employment? Because as that market tightens up, the biggest thing I hear from employers now is, where can I find the talent I need to grow my business?
I bet you're hearing that from all those people in Thunder Bay, where you come from, right?
Even in Thunder Bay, where people don't necessarily think that we have a job shortage. In fact, we do. Thunder Bay is a hard place to pull people towards in terms of immigration. Toronto is a hub for immigration, but in Thunder Bay, there are. You're right. There have been waves of immigration in Thunder Bay, but most recently, it's been harder to pull people to Thunder Bay. The climate is not necessarily as friendly, and as you know, one of the things in terms of immigration that makes people want to stay is community. So we have a thriving Italian community in Thunder Bay. It's amazing, and I celebrate many Italian cultural events with that community. But part of what's
just for the people who are watching it, so we got some imagery of the Thunder Bay area. But very few people think of Thunder Bay as a place that's multicultural. What is it, 127,000 inhabitants?
110,000 people.
It's
yeah,
110. About 27 to 30,000 are Italian. There's about 25,000 are Lithuanian, Estonian from that area.
Finnish. We have the largest Finnish population per capita outside of Finland.
I actually went to that famous restaurant that has
the Hajdu, of course.
Hajdu.
Everybody loves the Hajdu.
But the first time I went there, people said, here's what you've got to eat. And you know what it was?
Pancakes.
No, it was
bacala.
Bacala.
Oh, saltfish, right, which is yes, bacala.
So all of my Portuguese viewers know exactly what it is.
Yes.
My Italian viewers know what it is. But when I tell them that you've got close to, call it 25,000 Italians in Thunder Bay, and they always say to me, well, what happened? Did they take the wrong turn on the 401?
Well, there was the immigration was several different sort of booms that happened in our community, mining and forestry, and then once the Italian community got established, of course, they brought their families and their friends, and that's the beauty of immigration. Sometimes it's
the
a
beauty
few
for the Finns as well, and
that's
all the
right.
others who are there.
And it's the community that keeps people in the region, right? So with I'm always so thrilled to go to the Italian Cultural Center. There's Festa Italiana every summer where the community
There's a new center, isn't it? Relatively new. I remember when they moved out of the older one to the newer one now, but
that's the Italian Cultural Center. So it's
beautiful
big.
Place.
It's beautiful. They've renovated it in the recent past. They keep it up beautifully. As a matter of fact, many politicians hold that center as a place to have rallies or fundraisers, including myself.
I've been there.
It's a pretty great center. And there's another one in Fort William. As you know, we have two towns that amalgamated in Fort William.
You represent, though, the Thunder Bay Superior North.
That's I do, yes. The Port Arthur side.
The Port Arthur side.
Yes, and we're very, as you know, in Thunder Bay, very proud of our particular side of town.
Well, but it's a great place to be proud of. But I went from there to Nipissing. Is it Nipissing? Nipigon. Is that still in your riding?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, there's Italian people all along the North Shore, which is part of my riding. So,
and they're all complaining. They all want better employment access. They want opportunities for growth. It sounds like they're downtown Toronto types.
I think no matter where you live, you want economic growth, and you want an opportunity for your children, and you want to keep your children and your family in the region in which they were born and raised. I mean, that's the goal, I think, and the dream for people. So to be able to raise your families, to be able to have enough of a diverse economy to keep young people in the region, that's the kind of thing I've been working on as Member of Parliament. And of course, my role...
People shouldn't forget that. You're a Member of Parliament. You're a minister for everybody else, but you're the Minister and Member of Parliament for Thunder Bay Superior North.
I am, and the Member of Parliament for Thunder Bay Superior North is the most important job that I do as an elected official.
Well, Patty, you've been very good and you've been very patient. I was going to say some good things about you, actually, to provoke you into a discussion that nobody wants to have anymore, and that's the SNC-Lavalin and communications issue. I saw you in an interview, and I said, someday she's going to come into these studios and be interviewed. And you've availed yourself fairly well. So but I want to thank you for that, and I'm going to invite you to come here again, and we'll talk about hot issues.
Well, thanks so much, Joe.
Okay, so Joe Volpe, on behalf of Corriere Canadese, Go Live TV, Corriere Media Group, thanking the Honorable Patty Hajdu, Minister for Human Resources, Employment, Skills Development,
And labor.
And labor, there you go. Member of Parliament for Thunder Bay, beautiful place. If you haven't been, you should go there. It's only about 22 hours by car from Toronto.
You can fly in 2 hours.
And you'll still be in Ontario. So watch us on Go Live, catch us on social media, read about us in the Corriere Canadese every day. You're actually going to see this interview in writing by one of our famous authors, Mariela Policani. So, Patty Hajdu, thank you very much. I should say the Honorable, mea culpa. I should have used the proper title.
Everybody calls me Patty at home.
Thank you very much,
Thanks
Patty.
very much, Joe.
Okay, all the best.
Welcome to Go Live TV, the future in your hands. The only multicultural IPTV station that brings communities together. Over 1.5 million people have already watched. Go Live TV, anytime, anywhere.